Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I am AJ, sitting across from me, Jason. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing great, AJ. Enjoying this lovely pollen-filled spring weather.
Amen. I'm already getting the stuffy noses.
Yep, my nose has been running all morning.
Oh, it's awful. I love Georgia pollen.
Yeah, I mean, it's we have an index down here. Whoever's listening out there doesn't know, right? It's like just like the humidity metric, we have a pollen count metric. Of
course. I feel like anywhere you go in the U.S., you're giving up something to get something. Like if you go up north, you're giving up necessarily not necessarily the pollen count in total, but what we have here in Georgia for the cold weathers. We don't have the snow like up there. Or if you go over to Arizona, they got the heat.
Oh yeah.
Or they say it's dry heat, which doesn't change. I mean, fire's dry heat. I'm not going to jump into it.
I think probably the nicest climate in the U.S. is out there around San Diego area type scenario. But once again, who can afford to live there? It's so expensive. Right. It's so crowded.
Well, today's episode, we are going to be talking about personality tests. And I'm interested in this. I work at a camp every summer, and this is one of the things that we teach. I love personality tests. I just love the information you get from them. I'm interested to hear your take on it. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. A good idea. Before we do, though, let me remind everybody, go to our website, check us out, Reschool'd.com. Check us out on the social media profiles, send us messages, let us know what you want to hear about. And, of course, wherever you get your podcast, give us those stars, as many as you can give us. We appreciate it, right? That keeps people interested. So
no kidding. Well, in today's quick question, since we're going to personality tests, I want you to rate the results from a personality test you've taken on how you are really. Like, another way of saying that is, do you feel that fairly accurate based on the one you took?
I have mixed feelings about these types of tests.
Okay.
Problem is, and I've taken a couple of them, career-related and just personality-related, non-career focused. It depends so much on how you answer the questions in terms of how well you understand yourself. In so many of the scenarios, you may be disposed towards, no, I want to be this type of person, but I don't necessarily believe I am. And I'm not certain that the questions on these are capable of teasing out of people who they are rather than who they want to be or who somebody has told them they are. So in that way, I honestly don't have a ton of faith in most of the tests out there for the overall purpose that they're supposed to, do to somehow encapsulate your personality in a few metrics like letters or numbers or something like that.
Which one did you take, by the way?
Well, I've taken Myers-Briggs. I've taken, I believe I've done a DISC assessment a good while ago, but the one that I thought was the most, in a way, focused towards career was the Berkman 360. Okay. And it was, I like the concept and the premise behind it. Not 100% certain how accurate it was in terms of helping you identify what career paths or types of jobs are best for you, just because I'm not certain I answered the questions fully based on who I am as opposed to who I think I'd like to be. And there again lies the problem. What about you? You ever take any of them?
I've taken the DISC. Like I said, that's what we use for our camp. And I've taken it. And I will say there are concerns that I have with it. Now, I will say one of the things with the DISC is it tells you what it gives you what it thinks. It predicts who you are really versus who you are mask-wise, so who you want to portray kind of thing, which is an interesting metric. But I do think in any of these, whether it be Myers-Briggs, whether it be Berkman's 360, whether it be DISC, or whether it be any of the other ones, I do feel like the best results come from when you are absolutely cold. Like you have no idea. You don't know what the outcome, what they're going to base it on. You don't know what the outcome possibilities are. You don't know anything about that because you don't have the likelihood of trying to become something you're not. You're not going to answer it in a specific way just for that purpose. And I realized that when I took the DISC the first time, I thought, okay, this is really cool. And this is fairly accurate to my personality, at least what I've been told. But then if I took it again, I found myself going towards what I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a problem with these things. So if you have any prior knowledge to this, like even if you've never taken the DISC assessment before, but somebody has told you about it, you kind of know where to aim, or you kind of feel like you should aim at these places. And I think that takes away from the integrity of the exam, or the assessment tool. So I do think they are good in certain situations. I mean, they do give you somewhat of a baseline. Like you said, I don't know the accuracy of the baseline, so it's almost more precision. But if nothing else, they're fun. Yeah. They make you think.
Well, before we talk about it too much, let's back up a little bit and kind of give an overview to whoever's listening out there. What kind of employment test are you going to take? Period.
Yeah.
Right. What that you expect that in order to gain employment or in order to, I don't know, stay in your job type scenario. What could you expect to see out there?
Well, again, we're looking at this from the career standpoint because we are in the career series. So these are personality tests, but we're looking at it from a career standpoint. These are things that you would possibly take in an employment situation. Like if you're going in for an interview or you're trying to gain a job, you may take one of these, or an abbreviated version of one of these. I'm not sure. But you have the personality tests that you, like what we're talking about, what we're going to be talking about in this episode. You also have skill tests to test your skills, which tend to be more, not, I wouldn't say projects because they're not what you would consider projects, but there's some kind of example of the skills that you have where you do something or solve something. We're looking at specifically from the personality side of it today in this episode. So that's a great question. We are looking at it from the career side, but these are personality tests. These are things that you're going to be taking within the employment process, getting employed.
Right.
So.
And in a different episode, we haven't done it yet, but we'll likely talk about perhaps some of these skill-based tests. And, you see skill-based tests all the time in technology and things like that. And then if you're going to go into consulting, everybody knows who aspires to consulting that the big hurdle of getting picked up by a consulting firm is making it through their case-based interview process, right? Where you're breaking that down. And that's a form of skill-based test as well, type thing. You really have to practice that going in. But for, lots of jobs, really just want to see if you're a fit with the organization or a fit with this type of career path. They have an idea of the type of person that they believe would succeed here, and they want to see if you're it, right? And they're using these off-the-shelf, out-of-the-box tests that say, look, this type of career path, you're looking for somebody like this type scenario. The ones I do have a little bit more faith in are the ones that are kind of sculpted to the business that says, okay, this is the environment that you're working in. These are the people you're around. This is your manager, your leader. This is their motivational stance, right? Because there's a history behind this, right? Now, I teach principles of management, and the Hertzberg two-factor theory, or the hygiene theory, as you often hear it referred to as, focuses on motivation in the employment context. And everybody knows that motivation is a product of engagement, right? And usually if you're engaged and you're motivated to work towards something, you end up being a high performer, right? People learn how to do things. It's based far less on intelligence, far less on prior experience and things like that than it is your overwhelming desire to do that thing and your engagement in what you're doing. So that being said, right, that theory focuses on your internal needs, right? It says that people have certain things that need to be satisfied internally. And if those things are satisfied, then you will be content. I use the word content, not happy, because happy is a fleeting emotion, right? You could win the lottery, you'll be happy for a few minutes, but then you're stuck in traffic on the way to go cash the check, you're going to be frustrated and you're not happy in that moment, right? So happy is a very fleeting thing, right? So you want to be happy.
Depends on what you're driving to that moment.
Yeah, right. You want to be happy, eat chocolate. It'll make you happy in the moment, right? But it's not a long-term continuous thing. Contentment is, right? And that longest running, the happiness study at Harvard, the longest running study in history, right, is really more focused on contentment throughout life and things and the effects of that type scenario. But with that being said, this whole two-factor theory says that the employment context has elements that affect your internal needs. So if I'm a type of person that for some reason I need recognition, Or I need, for example, I need a completed project. That if I don't feel like there's some end to what I'm doing, that I'm working towards something, I'll lose engagement in it. Or if I resent supervision, I want autonomy, right? If I'm not allowed to be creative in what I do, that type of thing. All of these factors that I have internally. Well, these are direct factors that the job can give me. They can either be high structure or low structure. It can be team-based, or it can be individual work. It could be, I may be a person who sees what I do as a way of keeping score in comparison to others. We don't like to think of ourselves like that, but lots of people do. They see money as, oh, I've got more money than you. It's how I'm keeping score against you, right? Some people see money as possession, right? Or opportunity for things. Others see it as security. So most of us have heard these types of things before, how you perceive different things like that. Well, that's directly related to our internal values, our internal wants and needs again, right? So if we do have that need to compare ourselves to others, as another example, if a job rewards you based upon performance in terms of the more you perform, the more compensation you get, how you see that compensation, right, can affect whether that's a motivating force for you. Lots of people in sales tend to love that eat what you kill environment, right? The higher you perform, the more money you make, okay, and that motivates them. Other people who see, quality of life and balance, right? The things that motivate them internally, like the experiential nature of life, right, would be less motivated, right? Because once you hit a certain point of compensation, you don't need more. Any more time spent on that compensation or earning that compensation would take away from things that you value or need. So at a certain point, you would be less motivated, right? And I know I'm talking a lot here, but the idea is like you're looking at two sides of the coin. You're looking
Sure.
at the motivational environment, and you're looking at your internal needs to see how they match up, right? And that's what a lot of these tests, in a way, are trying to tease out. They don't say that explicitly, right? They get it a little vague, right? They get it a little imprecise in what they do. They say, we're just going to say what your personality is and see this personality fits in this career path. And that's the problem I have with most of them, right? Because it's not necessarily about personality. Lots of people have this combination of internal needs that is completely separate from personality. So a lot of different personalities, in a way, could succeed in the job. It's just whether the nature of the job with that specific employer, the environment that the employer creates, aligns with your internal needs, right? So that's why I say the ones that are tailored to the environment, the actual employer, and it's very difficult to put these in a test, so really none of them exist, right?
Yeah.
This is you internally scoping a personality test to your environment and then giving it to the employee. So these aren't off-the-shelf tests I'm talking about. These are, kind of you get a consultant who had expertise in this to design a test for your employment environment, right, type scenario. Now, when employers do that, I think it has a lot better effect, right? So anyway, that's my spiel going down that way. So anyway, that's what you're going to see. This is the purpose behind these tests and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying and just, what it is and the purpose. I do think there's validity to them to a certain extent. Just to kind of, maybe my professor that I have this semester is going to listen to this and be like, hey, he really knows what he's talking about from the stuff that we talked about in class. But
don't count on it.
Yeah, probably not, but there's always hope. This is, I see a lot of factor analysis going into this. They run a bunch of stuff to see where the commonalities are in different areas, and they put those together and go, okay, if you do this, then you're this type of personality, or you do this, or if they answer this way, you're this type of personality. And for the majority, maybe that works, but you always have outliers, and where those outliers are, or to what extent those outliers are, that can be detrimental to a certain degree. If you're looking specifically at the Myers-Briggs, they do the introverted versus extroverted, thinker versus feeler, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. If you're looking specifically for, I'm going to use teachers for an example, because normally with teachers, you're probably going to look towards extrovert because you're around a group of people. And if you lose a lot of your energy, or if your energy is drained from a lot of people, then, which is an introvert, it's going to be tougher on you as a teacher because you're always around people, a lot of people, and you're having to directly communicate with them, interact with them. You may, your company may focus too heavily on the extroverted personality, and you're giving up, or you're putting a priority on that and not getting what comes with introverts, which is a huge piece. Like, that's, not everybody in class are introverts, or extroverts. Some people, so it's nice to have that balance to be able to say, okay, I need a good mix or good balance for all the balances in the class, in this situation, in the example I'm using, or for the manager of the business. You're not going to have everybody that is motivated a different way. You need to understand the motivation. So being able to limit it based on what you see from these personalities, I think is detrimental to the company. Yeah, but they are good in their own rights.
And what you just said, like an employer presupposing that an extrovert is going to be better just based upon the idea that, you're around people. But there's plenty of research that anything that these tests are based upon, these suppositions about a personality type is going to gravitate towards some activity or be better at it or be more engaged by it, or you're going to get more out of it. There's plenty of research in every particular element that you're making these presuppositions about, or these suppositions about, that are going to say you're wrong, right? So, extrovert gets energy from interacting with others. An introvert tends to be exhausted by interacting with others. But introverts tend to have a stronger, more in-depth relationship, and the people that they do have a very close relationship with, right, that's something more than superficial, does not exhaust them. It actually energizes them in the same way. So the depth of the relationship tends to be stronger. Now, you're saying, okay, you're going to put them in an environment where they have the potential to make more of an impact because the strength of relationship that they could form with a tight-knit group, like a class, right, could be stronger. So once again, you could do this with every single factor. And in my mind, and I got to put out there, I've done some research in this area myself, right, in terms of personality, career fit. And that's my biggest problem, right? I'm actually working with another professor on putting together a model that is better that works from that Hertzberg theory that we just talked about of two factors, right? More along the lines of how you assess the environment. And the number one factor research shows for the environment for employment is the immediate supervisor. So if the immediate supervisor isn't laying out more along the lines of what happens in the work environment, then you're not using the true baseline to determine whether somebody will be successful in this job or career. Because every job, every career path, while your functions in it may be similar across industry, it changes. All these things that relate to your engagement and motivation change based upon that sculpted and molded environment. So I tell my students all the time, I'm like, you think you want to definitely be an accountant in the sports industry or fashion or film or music. You think that because the idea of this industry, which you don't know anything about yet, interests you. But you have no idea whether the environment you'll be around on a daily basis, not just the activities you'll be undertaking, but the environment that it creates, because you haven't experienced it yet. You have no idea whether that will meet your internal needs. The best you can do is start to identify, based upon past experience, what type of internal needs you have. Me personally, the worst job I ever had was lifeguard. And I grew up on a farm. We castrated cattle. I mean, I shoveled.
Yeah, that was a shocking. We found that out a while back.
Right. I shoveled nasty stuff, right? I mean, hot days in the sun, time on a tractor, that type of stuff. Things that lots of people would definitely not like, right? Yeah. That would be miserable work for them. But for me, the worst job was when I would lifeguard. it, at least on the farm, I had a finished product. I had a finished job. I had something to do, something to complete, something that kept me engaged. And usually I had a lot of autonomy in how I got it done, right? Type scenario. And just those two factors alone meant enough to me that it kept me motivated, engaged in what I was doing. But sitting by a pool, just simply skimming the pool, right? Looking back and forth all day long with very little else to do except for when you call a break, you're skimming bugs off the top. That was the most monotonous, tedious, mind-numbing type thing to me. But my personality type is such that I'd rather be doing work that I enjoy than sitting on any beach anywhere, right? And that's a personality factor that you can't necessarily judge. You have to experience and you have to say, okay, I realize that. Everybody would say, having a Baywatch type job's got to be better than, scrubbing floors, but not necessarily for the person, right? Not necessarily. And that is the difficulty. That is why these tests tend to be very imprecise.
One of the things that's interesting to me is, with the Myers-Briggs, you have the E versus I, which is extrovert versus introvert, the S versus N, the J versus P. It seems to me, and same thing with the disc analysis. You're either high D, high I, low S, low C, whatever. Mm-hmm. They put you in a category which tends to be more binary than the spectrum, which it really is.
Right. And no degree of assessment, right?
And so, for instance, you have in Myers-Briggs, you have extroverts and you have introverts, but then you have this middle ground, this gray area in the middle, which is those extroverted introverts. The ambiverts,
right?
Which is, and that it doesn't talk about that. It doesn't get. It feels to me when you get the results, it kind of feels like if you're not in one of these categories or whatever the category you're in, it doesn't give you the full story. It just says this is you, and you fall into this group. And I don't that part of it I'm not a big fan of, because there are those gray areas. It is a spectrum or a continuum, if you want to call it that, if it goes to the extremes, and it doesn't give you that it doesn't give you the range.
And I'll tell you another downfall of that. So you've got the lack of degree of assessment on each of these personality factors. Then on the other side, about the job, you have some, you suppose things about what type of personality would do better in a given job. Oftentimes, the doing better determination is not a good determination. Some of the best, so for example, we know that extroverted people tend to move up in organizations more quickly. But we also know that it's not based upon quality of work. The number one factor is how, for you moving up in an organization, is how closely you relate to your manager. So if you relate well to your manager, your work, it is far more important than the quality of your work. And as a matter of fact, people who do great quality work, women fall into this category. Research shows early on that women do far higher quality work than their male counterparts in professional services jobs. Strangely enough, right? It's just whether it's the difficulty level it is for women to break into a work field or force, right? That requires that extra level or performance, right? A male doctor is nearly 3 times as likely to commit malpractice on you than a female doctor.
That's comforting.
Yeah, I know, right? So I always, believe it or not, I know this is crazy, I always go to a female doctor. It's not saying for any individual case that's true. It's just saying across the board. So for whatever reason, right, and there's a whole study, and I've done a little research on this, a little writing on this as well, in terms of the genesis behind that, right, and this whole aspect of fit. And so, but the takeaway from this is people tend to move up because you relate better to your manager. Historically, more men have been in the workforce, that type of thing. We know that men tend to relate to men better in terms of camaraderie and things like that type scenario. Oddly enough, that does not always remain true with women in the workforce. But that being said, so if you're going to move up based upon fit rather than competency, most of the people you see at the CEO ranks or the high executive levels tend to be, well, because of historical tendencies, men, right? And they don't always tend to be the most competent at what they do. They tend to be the most social. So we get this supposition again that somebody who rises to the top and is a leader of an organization, whether they are a good leader or not, right? That's the ability to inspire and motivate versus the ability to assemble resources. So for whatever reason they rise to the top, we assume that an extrovert is the best person to have at the top. But there's plenty of evidence throughout history that some of the most effective CEOs, right, in terms of their performance, however they arrive there, but the most effective in terms of performance, their personality spectrums were across the board. Some were extreme introverts, some were highly extroverts, right? There's a whole theory, propounded by Carl Icahn particularly, that says, he's a very well-known corporate venturist, right? But he basically buys companies, restructures them, breaks them up, does whatever, and then resells them, right? A lot of people would use the pejorative term.
Common day stuff, huh?
Corporate raider, right?
Yeah.
And he's made a lot of billions of dollars doing it. But he said the number one factor he looks at when taking over a company is the CEO, right? He says it's always the same person, and they're never the most competent person for the job. They were just the most competent person at rising through the ranks. He's like, so I can always replace them with somebody who is competent, but who would never, in most scenarios, have been able to rise through the ranks because their personality wouldn't allow it, but their competency level in terms, and he said, I can add value there just by doing that. All right, so there's tons of anecdotal like that, but also tons of research out there that shows we don't have a good understanding of the alignment with what is going to make us individually successful in a job, whatever our determination of success is, right? So these tests, they suppose things about us, and they suppose what success means in a job, and they suppose things about, and there's very little way, if you don't customize it or tailor it to the job, and then do an adequate job of assessing the person in comparison to that job, to determine whether somebody's a good fit in a given career path. So my warning to people out there is this: don't put too much stock in that crap, right? It is not the be all end all, right? Career centers will promote them. You'll hear all about them, advertising stuff, and people just really honestly don't know any better. Okay.
But when you say it's more of a starter point, like if you have no idea what you want to do, isn't it at least a good foundation that you can kind of grow from?
I think there are better ways.
Okay.
I think you can start learning what people do in an industry or career path, and then you can start trying things of similar structure. My advice is not to focus on industry or career alone. Focus on yourself and what keeps you motivated. I love a good project. Give me a project anywhere, I'm content. Take away the project, make it mundane where I have to do it over and over and over, and my quality of engagement goes down dramatically.
Let's pivot a little bit. This will be the last question, but I'm really interested to, and I'm sure some of the listeners are thinking about this too. All right, let's just say you're sitting in an interview, and this would probably be what, the third or fourth step in the interview process, depending on where you're going, maybe second or third. Mm-hmm. And they say, okay, we're going to give you a test, and you've taken the Myers-Briggs test, so you kind of know what to expect. You know what the outcomes are, or a disc analysis. You're sitting there about to take this. Is there a way for you to gain that assessment?
Absolutely.
And one step further, should you?
Yes.
Okay.
On both.
So you can game it and you should. All right, explain.
I'm a firm believer in opportunity, right?
Amen.
And everything we do in terms of school, in terms of skill development, things like that is partially with the idea of we want to have that ability, but more so than not, we're trying to create an opportunity for ourselves. We're trying to give that signaling function. We got a degree. We're trying to say we got this experience in something, so hire us. Most of the time, we're going to have to learn the job when we get there. Most of us do, right? It's just across the board. So getting the opportunity is as important as anything. You can't be sure that anybody out there that is trying to assess your fit in the job or the position is going to be able to do that accurately. Okay. So for that reason, they don't know. They don't know whether you're going to be engaged. You can make that determination. And if you believe this is for you and you say, well, they're not going to hire me unless I can put myself out there as being more of an extrovert, well, answer those questions in a way that's going to point you out as an extrovert. When they ask you, would you rather go to a party or would you rather sit in a library and read? Well, that's a pretty obvious one. Even if you are the person who's going to sit in the library, tell them you'd rather go to the party, that type of thing. And, if that's not true, is that being disingenuous? Well, in a way, I guess you can look at it however you want to. I don't see it as unethical because you can look at it in terms of they have no idea whether I'll be engaged for this job. They're trying to figure that out. What I am telling them is that don't look at me as an introvert or extrovert. Look at me as somebody who wants this job, who will be engaged by the job, and give me the opportunity to do the job. So in that way, I'm all about gaming it.
Yeah, it's strategy. If they're going to ask you the question that opens the door for strategy to be put in, then I think part of it is the strategy of putting it in. Like it's not like if somebody, like, you go back to your example, if they said, well, would you rather go to a party or sit at a library and read? That question in and of itself is there's too many variables in there that you can't apply with. You can't. There will be times where I'd rather be, well, not me. If you'd have said anything other than library reading, I would have said, there's other things. But, if you said, would you rather go to the party or stay at home and binge watch some Netflix show? Okay, there are times when I'd rather go to the party, and there are times when I'd rather watch the Netflix show. There are variables that in that question are not being factored in. So I'm going to factor in the only variable that's relevant to me at this moment, and that is what I think this person wants to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were to ask me, would I rather go to the party on a certain night or with certain people there or the certain outcome there, then maybe I would go to the party. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I wouldn't. It depends. So if it depends, then it depends on the situation you're answering that question in as well. So that's the strategy that you're going into. I don't think it's unethical, because the question is already loaded. Like, you can't now, granted, if you wanted to put yourself and play both sides of the coin, you can explain it. Like, your qualifications of all the questions that we ask in the quick questions, pretty much it's a great example. But if you want to go that route, you can. But I mean, shoot, if I know that they're looking for a certain personality, then why not go for that? If I know that they're looking, it's the same way. You're never going to have we've talked about this in our resume episode. You're never going to use the same resume for every job.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to, personalize it and make it specific to the job that you're going in, because you're going to put your best foot forward for that position. And that may include answering some of these questions as well. So I don't think it's unethical. I think you absolutely should do what you need to in order to get the job.
Yeah, me too. And so I'm going to give my idea for the perfect scenario for hiring somebody. Doing an extensive personal interview, just trying to get to know the person better. I'm a big proponent of, come work here for a month. This will be a trial period, but we're not offering you the job. You're going to be an independent contractor for 1 month until the end of the month, and then we're just going to see your level of engagement. We're going to see whether this motivates you. We're going to see whether you're a personality fit. And there you go. We'll go from there. We'll make a mutual decision as to whether you want to stay on with this company type scenario. That would be far more effective, because internally we can process, when we interact with somebody, we can process whether they fit in the environment, and we can tell, right, whether they're engaged by the work. But just in cursory interviews, just in personality assessments and things like that, we can't make those determinations. The tests aren't precise enough. I have very little faith in them. You have to tailor it to the job and the position. And, that's why companies use recruiters, right? Rather than simply hiring somebody based off of paper, right? That, you've got a few internships, you went to the best college, blah, 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 you get the job. It doesn't work like that. It shouldn't work like that.
I agree. So, well, that was a great show. I hope y'all enjoyed it, listeners. Jason, you got any parting words before we head out?
Yep, just going to tell you one more time, same thing I tell you every episode. You got to let us know what you want to hear about. We need to hear from you through any channel you want to reach us. You can reach us through the social media profiles. You can reach us on our website.
Email.
So that being said, check us out on your favorite podcasting platform and give us those stars, and we'll continue to show up higher in the results, and we'll have better and better topics, and it'll just benefit you more. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, listeners, it's been fun. Until next time, we hope to see you there. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.